What's up YouTube? My name is Sean. I'm a hobbyist beekeeper and looking to make some videos. This will be my first video for YouTube, and I'm going to make, in today's video at least, I'm going to make a winter cover. I'm building my winter boards, my winter top cover, inner covers if you will, and these are essentially a good tool to use. They work well for me in my climate to overwinter. They may not work for you in your climate. You kind of have to, I'm sure you've heard, if you know anything about beekeeping, the best thing to do is start reading and find a local beekeeper and ask them questions and find out what works for them. But in our area, this works well for me. It provides a little bit of insulation here. It's a foam insulation board, and also adds a upper entrance and for a way for ventilation as well. This particular one also allows for you to mix up sugar candy or a candy board, and pour that in here in its liquid state, and you let that set. This becomes a mold for it. You let it set, it sticks to the board, it becomes hard, and then you can put that on top. When you put this on top of the hive, the moisture from the cluster in the hive works its way up and can start softening the sugar, the candy board, and then as the bees work, the cluster works its way up to the top of the hive by the end of the winter. That's there in case they need them. It's just an emergency type feeding, or emergency, or rather an insurance policy for the hive itself. Works well for me. So without further ado, we're going to get into making this, and I hope you guys enjoy the video. All right, so let's get started here. The first thing I'll do is tell you what you need to build this winter cover. It's very basic. This is what I use, and you can get this from a sawmill or from a big box store, depending on how many you're building. Would really determine where you're going to sit. If you want to go to a sawmill just for one board, or if you want to go to a big box store just to get this one board. So here is all you need to build one of these. You need one 8-foot long by 1.5 inches by 3/4 inch thickness. Okay, one board is enough to build the framing for one winter cover, the sheet remaining. So really all you need, if you can find somebody that already has it, is a 19 by 15 1/4. Now this is all for 10 frame equipment. This is what I use. I use 10 frame equipment. So these are the dimensions for 10 frame equipment. 8 frame equipment would be obviously smaller than this. So anyway, you need this. Basically what I use is a foil backed 1/2 inch foam insulation, rigid insulation board. And that's what I use. So those are the two things that you need to build this kit, or build this piece of equipment. And then obviously you're going to need nails and glue later on. But all right, so that's what you need. Going into our first cut on this on the framing, we're going to run a dado cut the whole length of our board, because the recess is basically what we're cutting is the recess for the foam board to sit inside the framing itself. I have a dado blade set up. My cut, the first cut is going to be to create the dado. So we're going to come in 1/8 inch from the top of the board, which would be the top of the framing, and it's going to go down a 1/4 inch deep, and it's going to be a 1/2 inch wide. Okay, so 1/4 inch deep. All right, so we cut our first cut on this on our board for the framing of the top, or the winter cover. So adjust the camera here so you guys can see it. Make sure we're getting it. All right, so this is our first cut. Again, I did this with a dado blade set for 1/2 inch thickness. You can see that it's a 1/4 inch deep, and it's an 1/8 inch from the top, and that's run the whole 8 foot of the board, the whole length of the board. This is going to serve as the recess for our foam insulation to sit down in, and this again is to build the framing, so it's going to be recessed the whole way around the insulation. So that's our first cut. Our next cut's going to be on the miter saw, and we'll cut the individual the side pieces and the front and back. Okay, so the next step is taking our long 1.5 by 8 foot and cross-cutting that down to the sides and the side pieces, the 2 side pieces, and then the front and the back. So the easiest way to do it is just make your cuts as you go along. So you cut 2 pieces off of that 8 footer that are 19 1/4. So you need 2 of those, and then you need 2 that are 16 1/4. So those will be your front and back. Let's get kind of caught up on where we're at. So we've already cut the 2 side pieces, right? The fronts and the backs. We've at least cut the framing for it. Now we're going to start working on the joints. Actually, back up one step. We also cut the recess to which the foam insulation is going to fit into. So you can see if I just kind of bring you up close here, you can see that the foam actually is going to slide back into that dado that we cut the whole way around the framing. All right, there's that 1/8 inch lip. That's the top. Just another look kind of from the inside there. You can see the foam insulation is recessed back underneath there. All right, next thing we're going to cut is we're going to work on the joints for the framing. So we got to cut a lap joint. It works for me, works for this application. It's just simply, we're going to take away 3/8 of the thickness of the board at the end here, right? And that creates a good solid joint for the corners, and it's definitely strong enough for what we're doing. All right, so the next cut, like I said, we're gonna create the lap joint for the side pieces to fit into the fronts and backs. And again, this is gonna be on the front and back pieces that you're gonna make this cut on. Just the front and backs. The side pieces we're done with. The front and backs, we have this cut and one more cut to make. So we're gonna cut the joint or the lap cut over on both sides of each front and back piece, okay? And they're flush on the end, okay? So we're coming in 3/4 of an inch, and we're removing this material 3/8 of an inch deep. And like I said, I'll make one pass. It sets it at 3/4 of an inch. I move it out away from the fence, and then I just pass it through again and remove the rest of the material. Works for me. Okay, so that is what we were going for, and before I cut this piece, I'll show you what it creates. So we went 3/4 of an inch deep. When we put it up there, it creates a flush edge at the corner there. See, it's flush. All right, so the next cut, the last cut we have to make is again, pick whatever piece from the front and back that you're going to deem to be the front, and you're only cutting this in one of those pieces. So identify the piece you're going to make the front piece, and we're going to remove this material here that's going to serve as an upper entrance and a ventilation. You move that from the bottom side of the frame itself. So again, this is the top, the 1/8 inch lip. So this will be the bottom. And we're going to remove the material in the center of the piece. This doesn't opening anyway. So you're going to measure in from the front 6 7/8 and then 9 3/8. Either side, from either side, just measure off of, and that's going to give you at least the idea of where your cut needs to be. Now, for me, I'm going to use my dado set, and basically how I do it is I will run using the guide here. I make some marks on my table saw, and you can see them here, different marks for different things that I make. But basically I have my first cut that I'll run over the saw, right? Remove that material. Then I have my second line, removes that material, and then I can make 1 or 2 more passes to remove the rest of the material. As far as depth goes, 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch is plenty. You don't want to go too much deeper than that. So you can see that creates what serves as the upper entrance and also for ventilation. So that's basically what you're doing there. Assembly of this whole thing. We have our 2 side pieces. We have our front piece and our back piece. And then we have our foam insulation. Everything's cut to length. Again, this is for 10 frame equipment. We're just going to start with one corner. Alright, we'll assemble that corner. I use a pneumatic air gun or brad nailer with I think they're 1.5" brads in there, maybe inch and a quarter. 18 gauge. It's plenty strong. So okay, I also use, tight bond for just that. All right, and it just takes a little bit of glue to give you that added strength. Okay, so let's go ahead. I'll tell you what, let's start at this end. This piece in timing. It helps to get the foam board and make sure that you set it right. You want if you have one side that's foil faced, you want to make sure that that's facing down, which would be the top of this cover. Okay, so I set with the dado down, and I'll slide my insulation in, and if you can't get it to side, it should be snug, because again, you want to be able to pour liquid sugar that will eventually become a candy board. You want to be able to pour that in here without it running out. So that's why it should be pretty snug, or you want it snug anyway. Okay. There you go. Now, as long as your boards are cut right, you don't really have to worry about square too much. It should pretty much fall square anyway. I forgot to put my glue on here. Or it should fall square as long as your cuts are square and everything like that. Just a tiny dab of glue will do ya. Just kind of gives a little bit of added. Alright. Put that in there. Make sure we're nice and tight. One there. One can of corner it. Okay. Alright. So there's that side. Now we just do the opposite side. Make sure you get your glue on. Oops. A little bit away from it. Now over here. Cat boom. 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 Alright. Last but not least, the other side. Alright. Glue. Glue, glue, glue. Finger spread it out. Excess there. Okay. That's pretty much it. You can see it's a pretty simple piece of equipment to make. And if you have a bunch to make and you're buying, or if you have a bunch of hives and you're buying them, this is one of those things where I would recommend trying to make it yourself if you can. If you have the tools and you have some extra time. A tool for my area where I am, where I keep my bees here in south central Pennsylvania on the East Coast. So it's a good tool. I recommend it. Giving it a whirl. If you have the time to make it yourself, definitely do it. If not, they're available that you can buy them from the big beekeeping stores, and then there's some places that you can buy them with the actual candy inside, and all you have to do is plop it on your hive when it gets to you. Okay, so the next thing we got to do for our winter covers is make the actual candy board that goes inside them. For this, today I'm gonna be making a batch, or my batch that's for about 5 or 6. It makes about 5 or 6 candy boards. So currently what I have going is I have 6 pounds of water in there, and this is all by weight. So there's 6 pounds of water, and I'm going to be adding 35 pounds of sugar into this slowly. And you just kind of have to do it incrementally, so that the sugar dissolves. Once you get the first little bit dissolved, then you can add more, and obviously it gets a little bit harder or a little bit harder to dissolve it as you add more sugar and it gets thicker. So I'm going to go ahead and add the first 10 pounds of sugar and get this going. Alright, so that's 10 pounds, and then we'll just start stirring that up. Okay, so we have probably about, I'd say, half of the sugar in for this batch. You can see that it's getting pretty thick. I mean, essentially you're making 5 to 1 or 6 to 1 sugar syrup here, so it's very thick stuff as you get it going. Okay, we're up to the point we're adding about the last 10 pounds, probably a little less than 10 pounds. See, just so you can see. Let's see if I can do it. So yeah, you can see how thick it ends up being. Get all this in there. And you just gotta stir it in. And again, this is a big batch, so if you're doing a smaller batch, it's much easier to work with, but you should expect to get it about this thick. So you can see, I mean, there's still some pretty big clumps that we need to break up, but I'll finish doing that, and then we will finish stirring this and get to the last step, or one of the last steps. Okay, so at this point, what I like to do is bring power tools into the kitchen, and just use my mixer that I have here for when I'm mixing up sugar syrup, and I use that up here too just to help. You see that, I don't know if you can really see the temperature of the syrup there. It's at 200 degrees Fahrenheit or just above. So I'm gonna stir it here at this temperature just to break up the rest of the clumps. I'm gonna take it off the heat and let it start cooling down, and I'll stir it again when I go to add the next ingredient. Okay, so the last ingredient that I put into my into this these sugar boards is going to be just a pollen substitute. But anyway, I'm going to slowly pour it in and use my drill mixer here as I pour it in to incorporate it. Don't have enough hands to do this, but I just pour a little bit in. And normally, if I'm not holding the camera, I'm mixing this as I pour it in. So I'll just show you now. It's going to sit on top, and it's not really going to want to mix, but you just kind of have to work it down in. So you just keep doing that until you get all of all of the pollen in. And this is, I don't know if I said it, it's a pound of pollen for this batch. So again, I'll put the recipes and the amounts. I'll try to do, I'll put them down in the description of the video. I'll try to do okay, so that's what it looks like when it's all said and done. There's still some chunks in there, but that's alright. You just want to try to get as many of them out, the big clumps anyway. So now I'll set the camera up and we'll pour it into the winter covers. You just kind of have to eye up how much you're pouring in. If you have a little bit left over from your batches and you don't have any more boards to pour them in, just pie plates or pie pans to get the rest of it out of, or rest of it into, and then just let them set up. And if you run out of a candy board later in the winter, you can just pull one of these pans out and sit that on top of the hive. Okay, so as you're pouring it in, so this is the upper entrance, or the ventilation hole. I pour up. Now if you're pouring, you want to make sure you're pouring on a level surface, obviously. But I pour up to just below the lip of that, so about an 1/8 inch up. You can see that one there. Some of these are newer ones, so they're easier to see the separation there. But that's how I fill it up, and that provides a good amount of food in the event that they need it. Okay, so we're gonna wrap this video up to show you the finished product. You can see that after you pour it in, you let it set for, I mean, it only takes a little bit to cool, and then it's, you know, it's pretty solid. I mean, you could still dig your finger into it there, but you know, it is, let me see, you know, you can see that it stays in there as a board. and uses the top as a mold. So to put it on, the only thing to do is to put it on the hive. I'm not going to go out to my hives to do this just yet, but I'll show you what it would do. So just assuming this would be the hive, of course there'd be a top cover on it. These replace the inner cover, so you know you would remove your inner cover. I'm going to do it definitely before it gets too cold, too terribly cold, but remove your inner cover. So you would take your candy board, your winter cover, and you would take that, and again it replaces the inner cover, so you just put that with the candy board facing down, just like that, and leave it just like that. You put a top cover, a telescoping top cover on top of that. Put your brick on top to secure your outer cover, and then you go. So again, it's an insurance policy. Is that, and you can see you can make different. They don't all have to be for 10 frame boxes. You know, these are for some double nukes that I run. You know, it's the same principle. It's just a double nuke size. Has the same, you know, slightly smaller upper entrance or ventilation hole, but it's the same idea, and you can pretty much tailor this to however you want it. It is a little bit of work, but to me it's a lot easier to take this off the hive and clean up this cake or whatever is left of this at the end of the winter than if you just dump a bunch of sugar into the hive, roll in the top bars with some paper towels and stuff. I've tried that method. It's just not what I enjoy doing. I find this method to work better for me. So again, thanks for watching the video. I hope you found it helpful, and I'll see you on the next one.